think we're ready. Oh, we're going.
Oh, here we are.
Welcome to Life at 2030. Welcome back, Brad. Thanks for coming to join us again.
Anytime, anytime.
Which I think I've already said that you're already stuck with us. So, I just wanted to see how you're doing.
Doing good. New? COVID's driving us crazy.
Just a little, right?
But yeah, other than that, and staying busy.
Trying to stay busy. We have the holidays right in the middle of them.
Yeah, I'm getting a little busier starting Sunday.
Oh, what's up?
Well, I got called as Elders Quorum president, but you guys, that won't be till tomorrow, so you won't hear this till tomorrow anyway.
Good luck, Dad. You got this. I like how, we're going to be talking about how Dad was a bishop, and that'll be really fun. But first of all, you have some really funny things about confused passengers that we want to talk about.
Yeah, sometimes driving bus, people just assume that you know everything because you're a bus driver, so you know everything about the bus. But we have, at the time I drove, there were over 500,000 time points. And a time point is where a bus arrives, what time it arrives there. So with all the routes and all the time points, there were about 500,000 of them. And one day, I pulled into a bus stop downtown, and a mailman was standing there, and he said, "What time does that 37 come by here?" And I said, "Well, the 37 runs every 20 minutes. He said, "No, what time does it come? It's your job." And I said, "Well, sir, my grandmother sent me a birthday card, so where is it?" He said, "How should I know?" I said, "Well, it's your job." He's like, "Oh, okay, I get it. So, sometimes we shouldn't assume that people with their jobs know everything.
Very true.
And we should just appreciate that they can help with what they can and not expect them to know more.
Yeah, and then you did what every other person would do. You would pull a pamphlet down and say, "Oh, here's the route, here's the time." Because how are you supposed to know 500,000 times? There's no way.
Well, and sometimes people would hand me a schedule. Like one day a guy handed me the number 36. I happened to be driving a 36. He said, "What time does this Granger bus come by?" And I said, "Well, do you want to know what time the one comes now or what time the one comes in an hour?" I said, "You've got the schedule. Check it out." And he's like, "Well, I can't read this thing." And I opened it up and I said, "Okay, well, there's a Granger bus here right now." So he jumped off the bus and he looked around and he said, "You're the only one here." And I said, "And what does my sign say?" And he looked up and he says, "Granger, duh."
Here's your sign. Oh, that's great.
So buses are invisible. I mean, sometimes you would think that a loud bus people would notice. But one day I pulled up to a young lady on a bus bench and she's just sitting there. She was reading Stephen King's The Pet Sematary.
Oh, man.
And she was intently reading it. So I opened the door and I said, "You need the bus, lady?" And she threw that book about 20 feet in the air. She said, "Where did you come from?" Now, this is a 40-foot diesel smelly bus. She's sitting on a bus bench, so you got to assume that a bus is coming. And no, I appeared out of nowhere. I came from deep space and snuck up on her in stealth mode.
Hey, that just shows that she had some intense concentration.
Yep.
We all need to learn that unless we're waiting for a bus. And I remember when I went to the U, I had to catch 3 or 4 different buses just to get there from our house. And it took half an hour for you and I to just pore over these schedules and figure out what's the best way to get there.
Anymore, that's one bus. One bus picks you up in front of my house, takes you to the U.
They figured it out then.
Yep, figured it out.
Gosh, 20 years ago, that would have been nice, right?
Yep,
Oh,
yep.
More
or the train would take you right there.
So many awesome things now. Well, Dad, you've been avoiding this subject.
I don't avoid the bishop subject. It's just that being a bishop, there is so much that you can't talk about.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to ask you to talk
And
about
I would
stuff.
never talk about those things. But there
Right.
are things that I used to share with my wife. Cool experiences, but not experiences that of a nature that I couldn't share.
Yeah, so we've picked a few that you feel comfortable. You know, this isn't going to throw anyone under the bus.
No one's getting
But-
thrown under the bus.
And just pretty much, you know, Dad, when you figure out your talks and stuff, when you're asked to speak, it's just those kind of stories that you would feel comfortable to share over the pulpit. So it's kind of the same here.
Right.
But I'm curious, you know, you were bishop for 10 years in an inner city ward.
Well, 9.5, yeah.
Well, it felt like 10, right?
Yeah, it felt like 30, but that's okay.
You're doing fine, right?
Yeah.
What did that teach you over that
Patience.
9.5 years?
Taught me there's a lot of good people out there. I mean, I had 10 counselors that I called in those years. I had 3 Relief Society presidents. We started out with no kids, 2 kids in primary.
That must have been so strange
That was bad. That was really bad.
because you couldn't escape to nursery and just go
No.
read a little kid a book.
And when I got called, within a week of me being called bishop, the whole elders quorum presidency moved, all the bishopric moved, and all the clerks moved, but my financial clerk.
Wow. That wasn't stressful.
So I didn't have and it was a ward that I wasn't a part of. I was called to serve as a bishop in a ward that I didn't live in.
Yeah, so you had to get to know everybody.
So it was a process of getting to know everyone and finding people to call as counselors and elders quorum presidency and
How did you not feel so overwhelmed?
clerks. You do it one day at a time, and it's not my church, it's the Lord's church.
True. So what's it like being a bishop?
That's hard to tell. I mean, it's like being a father, a grandfather, a best friend. I mean, everything wrapped up into one. You
Yeah,
know?
because you had people come to you about all sorts of problems. Did you ever have anyone come to you and they were just doing fine?
Yeah,
Was that far?
during tithing settlement.
That's true.
I mean, people just need someone to listen to. And that's basically what their problem is. They need someone to listen to and figure out what to do next.
So when you were bishop, there was no time frame. It could have been forever, right? And then they made it to where it was just 5 years.
No, it was a bishop will serve a term of 5 years.
So how did you
But just before I got called as bishop, the church changed that policy because some places
Oh, sorry. I
couldn't
guess I was
replace
backwards.
a bishop in 5 years. No, it had always said you will serve a term of at least 5 years.
Which must sound a lot, especially if you're a new bishop, right?
And my call came with the wording as long as needed.
Oh boy. You were needed for a long time, Dad. Could you ever escape being, having the title of bishop when you were bishop?
Well, no, once you're called as bishop and set apart as a bishop, you hold that office for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean you'll serve as a bishop. It's just bishop is an office in the Aaronic priesthood.
Okay.
And so once you're called and set apart as a bishop, you're always a bishop. Like
Always.
once you're set apart as a deacon, you're always a deacon. Or you're always a teacher, or you're always a priest. So you still have those responsibilities, but you just have more added on.
So I guess when you have that title attached to you, you could never escape that in your daily life, like when you drove bus.
No, and especially the people that you served with, or that you served as their bishop. You will always be their bishop,
Yeah, so you couldn't exactly just go to Wendover and start gambling.
No, you can't go out and order drinks at a restaurant. You can't go. I always knew that if I went to Wendover and gambled, I'd win.
Yeah.
and I'd win big so my face would be on a billboard.
Hey, that's Bishop.
So I never would. And it's a good incentive to stay true to who you are.
Absolutely. And, with you being called Bishop, you obviously were being as good as possible and trying to just live your life, right? And then they call you, and then before you were called, there was a pretty cool experience that you had with President Monson.
Oh, yeah. When I was serving in the stake presidency, we were looking to combine all the wards because our wards weren't very viable. So as a stake presidency, we'd set a plan together to try and combine all the wards. And then President Monson called President Simpson and wanted to meet with him and I. And so we met for 3 hours on a Mother's Day. And they told us that they weren't going to honor our request.
Well, can I back up really quick? At the time, President Monson was
First counselor
to President Hinckley, right?
Right.
Okay.
And we mentioned that the Jefferson Ward didn't have anyone that we could call to be their bishop. And that was one of the reasons why we wanted to. And President Monson asked if I'd ever been a bishop, and I said no, and he goes, "There you go."
Oh no.
Just kind of maybe you need to look outside the box. And so we were setting apart I was setting apart a first counselor in a bishopric when it came to the president and the other counselor in the stake presidency that I was the bishop for that ward. So
oh wow.
So President Monson started the ball rolling. And
what were some of the things that you can talk about that he was counseling with you guys in that 2-hour conversation that doesn't really happen very often?
No, we discussed the inner city and the problems with low attendance and not many. I mean, if you look at Salt Lake right now, it's probably less than 25% LDS.
For sure.
And so our ward, the wards in the inner city struggle in that they just don't have enough members and not enough priesthood and not enough to run a ward.
And a lot of struggling people within the area too.
Yeah, in our state, we have halfway houses and drug rehabs and everything in our area. So that's one of the things I dealt with as bishop is halfway houses and drug rehab centers.
And I remember you saying with the hotels that were in your ward too, every week there were people that you heard from that you've never met before and that you'll never see again.
Right.
And that must have been so strange for you. But my favorite were your members that were in Valley Mental Health. I love them so much.
I love them too. I love them all.
They gave you some funny experiences, but just their hearts are so pure. I mean,
yeah, there's a lot of people with mental challenges, and we all have mental challenges, but some have more.
Do you feel okay talking about Cindy and the monkey?
Well, yeah. I had one member. She was a precious lady. Her and the other lady in our ward, they were best friends, and one day I was on the stand. I hadn't been bishop very long, and she had a pink monkey wrapped around her neck, hanging down in front of her. And there was a seat next to me because one of my counselors wasn't there that day.
And this was the day that I was actually visiting
and
you guys.
Julie was visiting our ward that day. And all of a sudden, Cindy jumps up from her seat and runs up and sits by me, and she's crying. She's hysterical. And she says, "Bishop, the voices are telling me we're going to have a major earthquake. We need to get out of here." And I said, "Cindy, it's okay. This is a good place to die. Just sit down, listen to the speaker. Where's a better place to die of an earthquake than here in church?" She says, "We need to get out of here, Bishop." And I said, "Cindy, just listen to the talk." And she was crying, hysterical. I finally got her calmed down a little bit. she realized that I wasn't going to stand up and tell the audience we were going to leave. So she finally went back and sat down by her boyfriend.
So Mom and I are sitting in the front row. We watch Cindy go up, and she's making these faces and is whispering in your ear. And you did this so well, Dad. You were just smiling and turning to her and saying something. You know, that's what you were saying, what you just told us. And Mom and I could not figure out what was going on. And then same thing, we watched her walk back down, and well, that was over. What happened, Dad? And it was funny when we went back to your house after and you told us about it, and just bless her heart, you know.
Well, there's things that happen that you can't explain. And I mean, we fast and testimony one meeting, 2 ladies in wheelchairs are fighting over the microphone, and it was literally a demolition derby in the front of the.
John and I were there too. They both each one went down an aisle and they were racing, and then one grabs the microphone first and she speaks in the microphone and turns to the other and says, "I forgive you." So
I
funny.
mean, there are things you can't explain. Like one day, the deacon handed me the bread, and he said, "Bishop, I need to go to the bathroom." So he just left. So I stood up, and I handed the bread to my counselors, and I went and did his portion of the sacrament, and then I went over to handed the bread to the priesthood who was blessing it. And he says, "What do we do now, Bishop?" I says, "You bless the water, give it to me, and we go on."
And at one point, didn't Mom look up and say, "Wait,
Mom
what are you
looked
doing
up
there?"
and looked up because I passed her the sacrament, and Mom looked up and said, "What are you doing?"
Mom never knew what was going on. Oh.
And so I finished the sacrament and then went and sat back down.
There was a magic in Jefferson Ward.
There was greatest people in the world.
They would have done anything.
Such an
for you.
eclectic bunch from Mongolia, from everywhere.
And Cindy's best friend Betsy, she loved My Little Ponies.
My Little Pony. In fact, those were the centerpieces on Betsy's wedding when she got married.
Seriously, that's awesome.
Yeah, and Betsy was a dumpster diver. So before her wedding, I had to make sure that the dumpster was locked and closed up so she wouldn't go dumpster diving in her wedding dress.
What would she look for, do you know?
She loved to collect empty cereal boxes and stuff.
Interesting.
And she kept going to kick her out of her apartment because she was hoarding so much stuff.
So you dealt with really
We would go and help her
eclectic
clean up, and
things.
she would swear at me.
Oh no. Poor Dad. Yeah, you had a lot to deal with that maybe regular bishops don't. Oh, excuse the sound. Sorry.
Well, my father was a bishop, and he lived in an affluent area, and so his problems were different.
Oh, very different.
But every bishop, people are people, and
Was his problem convincing doctors and lawyers that being a nursery leader is not a big deal?
it may have been. I mean, at one point, I think he said he had 8 or 9 ex-bishops
Oh, wow.
and 2 or 3 ex-stake presidents, and so
And where do you put them in a calling where they feel?
yeah. I mean, what do you do?
And that was your dream calling, actually, to be a nursery leader.
I loved primary. I mean, primary was a place to go and to be. And one of my counselors came to me one day and he says, "How do you deal with all this? People and their problems?" Because people had been coming to him that day, and he'd been dealing with the young women's. And I said, "I'm going to show you a secret. I'm only going to show you this once." So I took him upstairs to the nursery, and I said, "Take off your jacket, put it on that chair, sit on the floor with 2 books. And you'll have a group around you, and you read them the book." I said, "This is what church is all about."
Yeah. Because you're serving these little people.
And once the Spirit is back, then get your coat back on and come on down and keep working. He says, "Is that where you disappear to sometimes?" I just went, "Shh, don't tell."
It's just us big people forget that we still have little hearts inside, and You know, you have to go to the little kids to find that.
Well,
Again.
and when you remember that they're your little brothers and sisters, and some of their spirits might be older than you.
Oh, it's so true. I feel that so much, Dad. I think Isaac, my youngest, is way older than me in spirit. Seriously.
So they're not just primary children, they're my little brothers and sisters, and I need to watch over them.
I love that. We all need to remember that. So, there were a lot of sacrifices that you had to make as bishop, especially when you weren't feeling well. And there was a time that you tell us about they redid the building.
Oh, they remodeled the
story.
building, and then we had a rededication of the building. And I was deathly sick. I had a high temperature. I was throwing up. I knew it was probably just an infection in my leg that was really bothering me.
Yeah, because that happened all throughout the years.
But I was due to run an open house for 4 hours before to show people, the changes that have been made. And
Right, and you from the beginning were a huge part of the process.
yeah, we sat with the architects and decided that we wanted to move the restrooms out into the foyer so that the young children would be watched as they went to the restrooms.
Yeah, because there were some shady areas for them to go.
Right, and a lot of the
yeah.
buildings, the restrooms are where people can't see, and that's a bad thing. So we designed that, and we made it family friendly. Everything we did was for, disabled, good ramps. And so we were involved with the architects. We made zonal heating and cooling so that when we came for appointments at night, we didn't have to heat up the whole building. Just the foyer and the bishop's office and the clerk's office. And church said they saved thousands of dollars a month on that building just by the idea we had to just heat those areas.
Which makes a lot of sense. So dedication day, you're not
Dedication
feeling
day, I'm deathly sick, and my wife and I said a prayer, and she prayed, and she said, look, if I could give him a blessing, I would, but I can't. So, Lord, you need to give him a blessing. So I went to the dedication. I was still deathly sick, but we did everything I needed to do.
And obviously, if you were sick with something that you could have been
I couldn't have
contagious, you
given
wouldn't.
anybody anything that I had.
Right.
It wasn't.
But this was a test of your faith, and you had come so far with the building itself.
Yeah, and I loved the old lady. I
That's
called
what
her
you
the
would
old
call
lady.
her. Actually, the church is really freaky at night when it's pitch black.
People think it's freaky, but I love it at night. It's peaceful to me.
Well, sorry to interrupt. So tell us the rest that happened.
So anyway, us two bishops spoke, me and Brother Murray. Brother Murray spoke first. And then I stood up and spoke about how the building, how much I loved her and how much she meant to me and how I was glad that they had taken good care of her and how the members were going to benefit. And then the stake president dedicated it.
So thinking back, we really should have had Mom in here with this, because I remember her saying that the Spirit was so strong when you were speaking, because you had so much faith to just show up and be there when you should have been laying down probably, but you had the faith to show up and give this talk and help.
It wasn't the talk that I had planned on giving. It just kind of came from the heart, and that's the way it was.
Oh, I wish I could have been there. Yeah, that's the example that you set for everybody, is you just show up when you can.
Yeah, you just, even if you're sick, nowadays being sick, you ought to stay home.
Yeah. That whole concept has changed. And there was another time that you really weren't feeling well when President Thomas had passed away.
Yeah, President Thomas, he was one of the developers of Welfare Square. Him and President Monson. And so I was really sick when it was his funeral, but his wife insisted that I conduct. and there were a couple of general authorities there, and he wanted to open it up to some of his family members, because some of his family members weren't active in the church, and so I was pretty sick, and I was sitting there kind of sweating, and the stake president asked me if I was okay, and I said yeah. And I said, I need to conduct this funeral. And it was kind of funny because I'm sitting stake president on one side of me, two general authorities on the other side of me, and we open it up to his family members. Anyone for 10 minutes would like,
Were you kind of nervous about that?
I was, but it was his wish. And all my nervous thoughts came to fruition when this young lady in these leather pants came up. She looked like she'd been poured into the leather pants. And she had on a belt, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was. But if you look on Cowboys mud flaps, there's a picture of a naked lady kneeling down. Well, there was a whole string of these naked ladies, which made the belt.
Oh, boy.
But she talked about her grandpa and how he was always a good example, even though she didn't always follow what he told her to do. And she promised him that she would be better. And the stake president turned to me and says, "You don't see a belt like that at church very often."
Oh, man. Did you say the two general authorities that were here or sitting next to you?
I can't remember what they were. They were mostly involved in the welfare of the church.
Okay.
So one of them was Brother Dunn, and I can't remember who the other one was.
Hey, that's fine. I was just curious. Wanted to know if there was anyone that I knew.
It seemed like Brother Dunn and I think a Brother Red. I can't remember.
But still, you were kind of nervous just going, okay, you were familiar with the way that your ward was.
Well, I wasn't nervous that they were there. General authorities see a lot more strange things than I do, probably.
Do you think so?
It's just...
I don't know.
I was never embarrassed by our ward.
I loved all the stories you had.
I just worried that people would judge them unfairly.
Right. And you living in you weren't living in the ward close enough, but you had...
They were my people anyway.
Exactly. And they gave you so many amazing, funny stories.
Oh, every Sunday was a bunch of amazing stories.
You had one every time. Oh, my favorite in our ward, in McKinley ward, was the guy that had his keys around his belt.
Oh, yeah, with the bad back.
And he would show up late and have this huge 2-gallon thing of water, and he would just kind of fall into the bench.
Yep. Just like an earthquake every Sunday. That was after he went up and gave the bishop his food order.
Oh, man. You see, every week, though, we couldn't fall asleep in sacrament because we would have missed something.
Absolutely.
So that kept us awake. So the last thing, sorry, not last thing. This one was a cool one. You had some great inspiration. I'm sure you had several times that you were inspired.
Well,
to
the
do
Lord,
certain
the
things.
Lord knew what the people needed more than I did.
Yeah, and he would let you know. And there was a family that needed a wheelchair ramp.
Right. We had a man who had a tumor in his brain, and they had a home, and we had discussed maybe making a wheelchair ramp so he could walk, but it was easier for him. We felt it would be easier for him to use a ramp. And he kept saying that he didn't really need it. I don't need a ramp. And so one day I was in a meeting with my inner city missionaries, and I said, the Lord has told me we need to build this ramp, and we need to build it now. And I said, any ideas? And the Relief Society president was in there, and she was in architecture school. And she says, let me design a ramp. I'll have it done by Tuesday. one of the missionaries said, I have a son who he's a franchisee of a Home Depot. In other words, he owns the Home Depot, franchised it from Home Depot. He says, let me talk to him and see what he can do. I said, okay, let's meet next Sunday and find out where we're at. So our Relief Society president came with the plans for the ramp. She got over to the house, measured everything, decided where it should be. She looked at codes to make sure that it met codes. The missionary came back and said, my son has donated a $600 gift card to Home Depot. And he said, and we have access to some other things that we'll need for the ramp. And I said, okay. I said, we need to get started this week. So the missionaries and some of us went down to Home Depot with the architect and bought everything we needed to make the ramp, the cement posts and we just started on the ramp. And the last Friday that we went over to work on it, we put the last handrail on the ramp and it was ready. It was done. And they came out of their house and they showed us a letter. And they had gotten a letter from their insurance company that says, if you don't have, we've discussed this with you before in letters. And the people said, we don't remember these letters. And the insurance company said, we're going to drop your insurance tomorrow unless you can show us proof you have a handicap ramp.
Seriously?
Yeah. And the Lord knew they were going to get this letter. So that's why the Lord told us we had to build this ramp now. So they called up the insurance, and the insurance company came over that day, and the insurance company was amazed and said, okay, you can keep your insurance.
Wow. It's so interesting, Dad, when you receive inspiration like that, and it's so, you know for sure this needs to happen now. How the Lord helps everything fall into place, especially when you're saying, okay, I'll listen, I'll do this, I'll do all I can. Just like this podcast, it came together so quickly for us because we just knew it was right to do. Yep. And I admire you for listening to the inspiration and acting on it, especially this one so quickly. And you guys had no idea.
Nobody had any idea.
That's so crazy. Oh, I'm sure you've had so many inspirations that I'm sure we'll think of more to talk on later. You know, how was your relationship with Heavenly Father as a bishop?
It has to be close. But probably the hardest 2 weeks of my life was the 2 weeks after I was released. Because things that were so crystal clear before were no longer crystal clear.
Interesting.
I mean, I could look at people in the audience and know who I needed to talk to. Knew who needed some help. And that's a blessing. I mean, people would walk in my office and I knew exactly what they were going to ask me. So
in a way, your fear and panic was gone.
Yeah, but there were a lot of times the Lord said, look, you know what to do, just do it. I think sometimes he kind of, not that I say we ask too much, but it's like the brother of Jared. You know, he went to the Lord and complained, look, you've given me all this, but the boats are dark. And the Lord's like, so what would you have me do? In other words, come on, do something to bring to me. Tell me what to do.
So he said, I did 99%. You have to do the 1%.
Right.
But even then, the brother of Jared said, okay, I have this idea, but I still need your help.
Right. The Lord just wanted to see his effort.
And that's all he wants in us, is to see
Right.
our effort. I totally agree.
I mean, I worry, you know, if I would have been the brother of Jared, there would have been a lot of things that worried me. I mean, why do we put air holes on the top and the bottom of the boat? What's exactly going to be happening here?
What are you doing to
Do we
us?
need roll kit? We have bees inside of here. What if these bees get out of?
I don't want to be
We're
in the
carrying
barge.
live fish. What if the fish tip over? I mean, we got blowholes on the bottom and the top of this thing. What's going on?
Do you assign your most annoying kid the barge with the mosquitoes?
With the bees.
So, Dad, when you were bishop, did you have everybody in every corner try and come confess their sins to you?
Nah, not really. I mean, people would come and, you know, when they want to change their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, if they want to change, sometimes people would want to go to the temple when a person's getting married. And, you know, it's not an easy fix sometimes.
Yeah, they want to see their kid get married, and
Or they want to baptize a grandchild. And so, I mean, I would do everything possible to make that happen.
absolutely.
But it's up to them, really.
So your mom would call you all the time.
Well, no, sometimes I'd sit down with my mother and she'd say, look, your dad won't do it, so I need to confess your dad's sins. And I'd say, Mom, you can't confess dad's sins to me. I'm not your bishop. Well, you were a bishop. I'd say, no, even if I am a bishop, I'm not your bishop. And you can't confess somebody else's sins anyway.
It's just not right.
No, it's your own sins.
Oh, I love that.
There's not a wife out there that wouldn't like to talk to her bishop about her husband's sins. But that's not the way you do it.
How do you do it then?
You have to talk to the bishop about your own sins.
You can't worry about anyone
No,
else's,
no.
just yours. If you had to worry about everyone else's sins, that would be a lot.
And the main reason is because you're the only one that knows for sure that it's a sin that you've done.
Yeah, because what your mom said is she's sure.
Even if you think Dad did that, maybe he didn't.
Maybe you just made it up to get him into trouble.
Right.
Oh, I love that. You know, what advice do you give to those that are just being called as new bishops? Not that, who knows if anyone's even going to hear this that's being called as a new one. I'm just curious. What's your biggest piece of advice for them?
That they're your brothers and sisters and you're not their king. You're there to help them figure out how to progress day by day. Only way to do that is team up with the Lord and move forward.
I love that. Dad, it's so fun to talk with you. There's so many experiences, and thank you for talking about these ones. I know there's a lot that you could say, and it's really okay to choose not to. And, you know, we will continue on with some more fun. Thanks, guys, for joining us, and thanks, Dad, for joining us too.
Anytime. It's a pleasure. Love you guys.
We'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Later. Bye.
Bye.
Later.